Today I'm going to be sharing 5 essential tips that you can use to increase your KD ratio and improve in Destiny 2 PvP. This is the second video of my series about how to improve KD, so after you finish this video that covers 5 essential tips, be sure to check out that first video that covers 5 big mistakes that you're probably making. I received hundreds of comments and messages saying that video helped people improve and achieve goals like their first We Ran Out of Medals or Flawless Trials card, and honestly that's the goal of this series. I want to help you improve in PvP and therefore increase your KD and hopefully have a more enjoyable PvP experience. Jumping right in with tip number 1, this is about angle management and peaking strategy to give you the best chance of success in every engagement. A lot of people see gameplay like the stuff in the background of this video and assume that if you have good aim, you can kind of just run around destroying big groups of enemies, but there's definitely more to it than that. In the first video of this series, the most upvoted comment was about how I said to avoid 1v6 gunfights, but then in the background you see me killing the entire team. As I pointed out in a reply to that comment, there's a really important distinction to make. I did kill the entire team in some of those clips, but you never saw me peek all 6 guys at once, and that's where angle management comes in. You may have heard of the technique called slicing the pie, and this is an essential strategy used across all FPS games and even in real life. When looking around a corner, it's best to systematically look at each angle one by one instead of just walking out of cover and exposing yourself to all angles at once. Take this spot on Javelin for example. This is a spawn location, so it's very likely that there will be a lot of opponents here. If I clear every angle individually like this, I will be checking for opponents while only showing my character model to one additional angle at a time. This is really important because if there were 3 opponents out there and I just rushed out and started blasting the first person I saw, I'd probably get destroyed by a team shot and get 1 or 0 kills. So if I employ the slicing the pie technique, I'll be putting myself in 1v1 situations that are totally winnable instead of a 1v3, and that's exactly how I make it possible to survive for a long time and go on big sprees in PvP. So if you feel like you often get pummeled by more than one enemy shooting at you, use this strategy to fight people one at a time. With that in mind, a really big mistake that I often see with newer Destiny players is making movement without regard to potential enemy positions. Certain areas of the map are very high traffic spots that players love to fight in for whatever reason, and with experience, you'll start to learn those spots and remember to be careful when you move nearby where they can see you. Way back in 2015, Bungie actually published this image of the Burnout map, showing where players spend the most time in red and where players spend the least time in dark blue. I thought this was pretty cool, and these movement patterns are fairly similar to modern day trials, but overall it just highlights that players really like certain parts of the map. Keeping that in mind when navigating the map allows you to predict enemy positions so that you can get the first shot in your engagements. On the flip side, it can also really throw off your opponents if you decide to stray from the beaten path and take up a more creative angle like this one. Regardless of the common locations though, sprinting out in the open or just running through open lanes often results in rapid death. If you really must go through an open area of the map, at least jump, slide, or dodge so that your opponent will have a more difficult time hitting you. Ultimately, this comes down to learning the map and sight lens, so if you want to quickly learn a map in a stress-free environment, I might recommend hopping into a private match and running around for a few minutes while paying special attention to sight lens and noting which areas of the map have good cover. Here's a quick bonus tip. If you peek with the cover to your right hand side, you'll be at an advantage because the camera orientation in Destiny 2 allows you to see your opponent while revealing less of your character model. Check out this example engagement where one player is clearly able to see more than the other due to this mechanic. Also, if you stay further away from the corner that you're peeking, you'll be showing less of your character to your opponent. While this bonus tip can be useful and help you come out on top, especially in sniper duels, it won't really have a huge impact on your game because it's not a good idea to only play certain angles of the map just because they allow you to peek with the cover to your right. Moving on to tip number 2, we have read the situation before you decide whether to fight, run away, or just hold your position. Being able to pick up on signals and make an informed decision about when to fight is essential for not only getting more kills, but also avoiding unnecessary deaths. This is something less experienced players typically struggle with because they don't pick up on some of the more subtle points of information around them, and they're unsure about when they should be engaging. I see some newer players who aggressively run towards the red on the radar and rarely stop, fighting everyone in their path. On the other hand, I also see players who are so passive and unsure when to engage that they end up missing out on winnable engagements and letting their opponent dictate the pace of the game. Clearly, neither of these examples are ideal, so it's essential to pick up on a few key indicators in order to figure out what's going on and increase your situational awareness. I've said this about a million times, but the radar is essential for locating both your teammates and your opponents. Use it to roughly gauge the number of players on both sides and determine which side has more guardians. If you notice your teammate is pushing, you should probably push too, unless he's headed towards an active super or something. Sound cues are also pretty important, and my next video is going to cover this in more detail, so be sure to keep an eye out for that. Listening to the weapons, grenades, supers, and jumps of your opponents and teammates can give you a good idea of what's going on while your eyes are focused on other things. I often find that a sound cue allows me to detect someone who is shotgun rushing me when I'm looking the other direction or aiming down sights. Another key part of this tip is to recognize unwinnable situations and get the heck out of there. If you take a lot of gunfights where you have like a 10% chance of living, your KD will certainly go down. Using the indicators that we just mentioned, try to approximate how likely you are to win an engagement, and if you've got a low chance of winning, you've just got to learn to leave even though it's tempting to rush in and try to be a hero. Now, I'm definitely not advocating for being overly passive, but I am advocating for rotation around the map and finding better, more winnable angles. Especially in 6v6, being able to recognize an unwinnable situation is key because simply due to the chaotic nature of having so many players, supers, and the occasional unlucky spawn, there's always going to be some BS that leads to unwinnable scenarios. If you've played a bit of 6v6, you know that sometimes you'll get really unlucky and spawn near 2 supers or several opponents. While it is possible to shut down the supers and opponents, 9 times out of 10 your best option is going to be to rotate back to your team and try to avoid taking a fight where you're facing a super and you're massively outnumbered. Some maps can make it easy to get trapped in the spawn, but it's normally still possible to rotate to your teammates. Tip number 3 is to recognize and heavily play into the strengths of your loadout. All too often, I see people using a loadout that excels at doing a particular thing, but then they rarely do the thing that makes it powerful. I'm not going to tell you to use one specific loadout, but whatever you choose, you should figure out what is strong about that loadout and capitalize on that strength as much as possible. When you look at your current loadout, what are the most powerful parts about it? At what distances are your 2 weapons the most effective? Is there anything that is considered OP? Are you focusing on that part of the loadout as much as possible? For example, I love playing the middle tree Night Stalker called Way of the Wraith while using snipers and hand cannons, and I'm sure you've noticed that in the background gameplay. It's really as simple as using precision weapons and crouching, but I take massive advantage over the flawless execution perk in order to see through the walls, and everyone says I'm cheating or something when it has been in the game all along. For real though, being able to see where people are is incredibly strong and allows you to pre-aim and then delete them as soon as they leave cover. Consider what the strongest part of your build is and then try to get yourself into engagements where you can capitalize on that strength. Engagement range is also an integral part of capitalizing on the strength of your loadout. Sure, you can occasionally pull off a flashy play like sniping people in close range or flick shooting across your screen, but that type of action shouldn't be your goal, and it's often a sign that you've made a mistake. For example, I've been using aggressive hand cannons with a sniper lately, and those are both fairly long-range weapons. If a shotgunning opponent is ever within 10 meters of me, that means one of 2 things. I'm intentionally pushing him because he's low, or I've probably screwed up. If I let a shotgunner get to the range where his weapon is most powerful and my weapons are nearly useless, it's usually an indication that my positioning and awareness is lacking. You should do your absolute best to avoid engagement ranges where your weapons are less effective than your opponents. As another example, if you're running a close range setup like a shotgun paired with an SMG, you should run from cover to cover and ideally never let an opponent engage with you unless you're within that range where your shotgun or SMG will do maximum damage. Ultimately, this comes down to increasing your KD by increasing the number of engagements where you have an advantage and minimizing the number of engagements where you're at a disadvantage. If you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to subscribe because I'll definitely make more videos like this in the future, and if this video does well, I'll make a 3rd video in this series. Tip number 4 is gameplay recording and review. This is an incredibly powerful practice that will vastly accelerate your improvement as a player, especially when it comes to your KD. This is perhaps the most actionable tip in this video, but it will require a little effort on your part. Every platform, whether it's console, PC, or Stadia, has a way to record yourself, and if you're unsure how, I'll try to link some resources in the description. What you should do is just record a game or 2 of you playing a regular playlist like 6v6 or Rumble. Don't record a game where you mercy rule your opponent or get stomped by top players. Just record an average, normal game of PvP. Try to forget that you're recording and just play like usual. I do recommend waiting a few hours or days so that you can have a more objective view of the footage, but the next step is to go back and watch that game and pay especially close attention to each engagement. Examine your deaths in particular and try to understand why you actually lost the engagement. Unless you got solo supered, there's almost always something that you could have done better to increase your chances of coming out on top. I recommend considering the other tips in this video and asking yourself if you are actually doing them. Did you peek an angle too aggressively and get destroyed by 3 people when you could have turned the situation into a series of 1v1s? Did you get stubborn and try to fight an unwinnable engagement instead of retreating? Understanding these things on a conceptual level is a lot different than actually doing them in game, and reviewing your gameplay like this can help you bridge that gap and actually use your knowledge to make more powerful plays. Another really essential point here is that studying your own gameplay is a super efficient way to educate yourself on how PvP works so that you can start to recognize patterns. When you're in the heat of a firefight, picking up on these patterns can be very difficult, and you might die 200 times to the same thing before you really start to understand how to avoid it or counter it. It's hard to pick up on all the details when there's so much going on during a game, and that's why reviewing your footage afterward can really help you understand what went wrong and what went right. I also recommend clipping anything that you consider to be exceptionally strange or unusual. If you don't understand how you died, clip just that death and go check it out after the game. I've personally learned so much from doing this, and it has helped me avoid dying to the same thing in the future. Another thing that can be quite helpful is receiving feedback from other players, because getting another perspective, especially from someone who might be more experienced, can really help you understand where you can improve. My community Discord server actually has a channel dedicated to doing exactly that, and the link to join is in the video description. I might even personally review your footage and give you some advice for you to use in your next gaming session. Before we move on to tip number 5, here's a bonus tip. When some players die, especially when they're in a voice call, they often complain and make excuses about how they died to some weapon or ability that is broken, overpowered, or just plain ridiculous. Instead of making excuses, it's best to take those few seconds before you respawn to ask yourself a key question. How can I avoid dying like that in the future? Complaining can be a tough habit to break, but ultimately it will help you avoid tilt and focus on what really matters. Last but not least, tip number 5 is to think ahead and consider what may happen after the current engagement. While playing chess, talented players often think 5 to 10 moves ahead to consider the consequences of their actions. Now, Destiny is certainly not a turn-based strategy game like chess, but being able to think at least one step ahead can really help you out, especially when it comes to improving your KD. For example, if you're rushing someone with a shotgun, you've absolutely got to consider what will happen after you get the first kill. In literally every 6v6 game that I play, I see people running in with a shotgun, getting between 1 and 2 kills, and then dying because they're super overextended. When it comes to your KD, it's important to avoid short-sightedness when it comes to your movement and choice of engagements. If you haven't seen the first video in this series, definitely go check it out. It covers the 5 biggest mistakes that you're making and how to avoid them in order to increase your KD. That video is on the top of your screen now and linked in the pinned comment. If I do end up making a part 3 to this series, that video will be on the bottom of your screen now.